OTAN, Outreach and Technical Assistance Network.
Hey everybody, not that anyone can see me. So my name is Robert Gomez. I'm an HSE teacher, Salinas Adult School. We're over there by Monterey off the 101. There's a pilot station there. It's very nice. So I'm sorry. So thank you for attending. I know just really quick story about resilience, about building resilience, and this just happened to me. And thank goodness, most of you will probably be thankful that you are online. Okay, so this is my first presentation. I'm not gonna lie, real talk here. Okay, this is my first presentation, and I'm just busy. I'm trying to find coverage. I'm a full timer. I'm that rare unicorn. I'm a full time adult ed teacher, and finding sub coverage and doing the plans, and I forgot to give the plans, and I ended up kind of co-teaching last night with the substitute online, and while I was polishing up my presentation at the same time. Well, anyway, they're all this mess. I'm thinking, oh, I can finally relax, guys. And then I go to find my luggage, and I'm thinking, where's my luggage? And I had left my my clothes at home, right? So pretty much I'm wearing the same clothes I wore yesterday. Don't worry, don't worry. Like I said, be thankful you're remote. Most of you guys are remote, but it's talking about resilience. It's amazing what some imagination, a bathtub full of soapy water and a blow dryer in the hotel room will accomplish in a short amount of time, okay? So, resilience, how can you build that kind of, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and I feel pretty good about myself. All right, I did pretty well. I'm gonna go to Target after all this today and get myself a wardrobe, but, I'm thinking, that was pretty resilient, it's just that there was, something there, and, how can we build that kind of resilience in our students, right? So, part of the way we can do this is gating the story, right? Think of, but first of all, a quick survey, and you guys at home, you probably saw the video game thing, and you might be a gamer, and hopefully you guys are. So how many of you have been playing some kind of video game during the workshops? I'm just wondering, and you can just give me a thumbs up or whatever. I've been playing Pokemon Go, off and on because this is a new place and there's some new gyms and, whatnot. Yes, yes, okay, awesome. Thank you. Right? That's great, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool gamer since, I'm 48 years old. I've been playing video games since I was 5 years old, 4 years old. And with the Atari VCS or 2600, right? So I kind of go all the way back to that, right? So how many of you guys, though, got interested in educational technology or technology in general because it's kind of video game adjacent? So, because we're kind of next to the things that we like anyway, I'm just wondering, because you still get to play with the toys, right? You're at work, but you still get the cool toys. Like I know I get to use the owl. What about you guys, right? Maybe? No. This is the reason why I asked this, because I went to a Google boot camp, right? Google certified educator boot camp, right? Almost everybody in there was saying, hello, my name is, I'm a gamer. That was like about 75% of the people in the room. As a matter of fact, one of the teachers there that I met was a coworker. I hadn't seen him in about 15 years, since about 2000. And I had worked with him at a San Jose Funko Land. That was GameStop, right? That's what GameStop is now, but it was Funko Land. I hadn't seen the guy in 15 years, but yeah, and he's there too. And I know he was a gamer, right? So, that happens, right? It's here, it's in us, right? I mean, and real talk, I mean, yeah, that's why I took it, you know, I get to play with the toys. There's nothing wrong with that, right? We need to be honest with ourselves, right? Um, but let's take a step back though, before we get into video games. And we're gonna talk about what is play, right? My community college instructor, because I, you know, barely graduated from high school. Um, and I went through community college. I had to take a lot of remedial classes, kind of work my way up. And the instructor, my college for math for non-majors instructor was telling me, you know, you shouldn't teach high school. I went, really? Yeah, I said, yeah, you know, you can do what I do. I said, really? Yeah, you know, when I'm here, I feel like I'm playing with you guys. He's a math instructor. So he found the game. He found the game in what he did, or at least he found a sense of play in what he did. I'm just hanging out with you guys and I'm just playing. I said, wow, that's really cool. And then I started, or thinking, okay, maybe I should pursue my master's, right? So that's kind of was a big pivot point in my life. But what is play? You know, what is that feeling we get, right? Well, so there's this word, historical and culturalist, Johann Huizinga, right? He came up with this idea of homo ludens, which is the man that plays, that we play, that's what we do, right? We play, and once again, if anyone wants to stop me, if anyone has any questions, let me know, I'm okay with that. That's how I run my class too. I tell my classes, if you have a great question, I'll stop, I'll put it on the board, because if you're stuck and someone else is stuck, if it's an excellent question, I'll turn it into a lesson later. All right, that's what I said. Okay. And, well, what's play? Well, it's free. It shouldn't have to cost you anything, right? Just play. I'm not talking about video games, just play in general, right? If I have this, bottle right here and I can make a game out of it. People flip bottles, right? They take their bottles and they start playing a flipping game. I'm sure you've seen it before. And there's no real, it's free for the most part, unless you pay for the water bottle, right? It's out of ordinary daily life. It's not your work a day. It's not driving to work. It's temporary, right? It's temporary. And, in that it creates kind of an in-between space called, a liminal space. What Victor Turner, who's an anthropologist, calls a liminal space. And I'm not talking about like the back rooms, like liminal space, or like empty mall corridor liminal space. They're related, right? But talking more like, that in-between place, adolescence is that in-between place, right? When people are, graduating from high school and they're walking across the stage, right? It's that in-between place between where you started and where you finished, right? And adolescence is like that. So life passages, right? Things like that. That's called a liminal space, and play happens there. We create a space, right? That is kind of like a bubble outside of our everyday life, right? It creates order. It creates rules. It creates conditions. Because I'm going to play with this water bottle, right? And pretty soon I'm going to make up rules. Okay. If I can flip this water bottle and it ends up on the cap, I win, right? So it creates order, it creates rules. Because if you're dealing with more than one participant, right? You gotta play nice, right? You guys gotta play nice. You can't cheat, right? You gotta play along, or else the game doesn't happen, play doesn't happen, right? So it creates orders, conditions, rules, boundaries. It's necessary for a play community, right? Even if it's just a couple kids on a schoolyard jungle gym pretending that it's a pirate ship, they all gotta buy into that, right? So the person that wants to play spaceship, you're out of luck. You're gonna have to play pirate, okay? If you wanna play, right? And also, play, it's not for making money. Once again, I can, start doing this and it's, I'm not making money. It's just playing. It's intrinsically not materially profitable, right? That's what it should feel like when we play. All right, guys? So, but eventually that play turns into something more formalized. It turns into a game, right? Jesper Jewell, who's a writer, he's a columnist, but game studies professor. He says it's basically a rule-based system with variable and quantifiable outcomes. Basically, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It can be measured, right? Different outcomes are assigned different values. Usually it's win, lose, right? The player exerts effort in order to influence the outcome. There's an effort to make that, to change the outcome, right? The player feels emotionally attached. That's important, guys. Think about that. Think about a student that you have, right? That really pours their heart into something and really kind of starts really getting involved with an assignment or a project. It becomes personal to them, right? There's some kind of emotional attachment that maybe wasn't there before, right? So this space, this liminal space is created, okay? And the consequences of the activity are negotiable, right? It can, change, it can change, right? Chess, let's talk about a seemingly simple game, guys. Chess is a perfect example, right? It's got a system of rules. Now, I do have the long version on this side of the screen. I have the short version here. So whatever you are feeling, guys. So on this side of the screen, I have the long version. I have this, I'll give you a moment to kind of digest that for a second. My dad taught me how to play chess when I was 5 years old. He needed someone to play with. So he taught his kids how to play, right? So it's a perfect example, okay? Jesper Jewell says that it's got a system of rules. There's an outcome. It's you win, you lose. It takes effort, investment. Have you seen chess tournaments? Have you seen what happens when people win or lose? Some people will like just pound and just storm away, right? And there's an investment. The consequences are negotiable, meaning that they may have real life implications, or they might not, right? Sometimes play is just play, but sometimes play means something. It might be your career, if like you're an athlete or you're a professional chess player, right? It's money. Also, guess what? Chess, it doesn't look like it, but it tells a story with emotions attached. I know. What's emotional about this, right? You have this chess piece. What doesn't really scream high drama, okay? It really doesn't. But it does tell a story, guys. It actually, there's a dramatic story there. We love drama. We love stories, okay? We love stories. We love stories. We're story makers as people, okay? The player feels emotionally attached to the outcome. Chess is perfect because it tells a story. In both this simple dramatic conflict, it's very representational. You have one army here, you have one army here. They're locked in deadly combat, right? You have knights and bishops and pawns, and they're on the battlefield, and whoever wins takes the kingdom, and that's what it's representing, right? And of course, there's this meta narrative on the outside, that we stand outside, we look and we say, hey, wow, this is really like, I'm watching these two chess players and they're just really intense, right? And we give that meaning, right? We give that meaning from the perspective of, well, especially if you're a gambler and you're betting on that particular chess match, it happens. I mean, if there's a competition, people will bet on it, right? But games create that dramatic action, right? Dramatic action happens when you have a protagonist, right? And you have something that's getting in the way of the protagonist's goal that creates conflict, right? And our students face that every day, right? It might be an external conflict, it might be someone else, it might be society, it might be the economy, but, right, they face that. However, games create that dramatic action too. The idea here, though, is to try to find it in your course, right? So what is dramatic action? Well, pretty much it's not shootouts and gunfights, right? It's not John Wick, it's not, whatever. According to, these people are theater people, okay? These are, dramatists. Aristotle, he's a guy. And, he wrote some things. And, basically they're saying dramatic action is when something or someone makes something happen. That's it. And then there's a chain of events, all right? It's a process of causal events, and reactions. People make that happen, by the way, oftentimes, right? Through our motivations, through our wants, our needs, our desires. Now, think about your student real quick. Think about one of your students, right? That's your hero. That's your hero. That they're the hero in their own adventure. And they take that first step, right? And when they first take that step, when they walk through that door, when they register, when they fill out that form, when they take the CASAs, right? A series of actions and reactions will follow in their personal lives and your life, right? The actor becomes a protagonist in the story. They become the hero in their own story. And figuratively, literally, sometimes there's stakes here, right? And however, if the protagonist, and especially in a video game and in life, doesn't have a guide early on to mentor, train, and educate, they can get overwhelmed, right? They can get confused. They can become the loser in this narrative. And what is losing? They quit. That's the losing. It's not the failure part, because we can learn from that. It's when they quit. It's when the attrition, that's the attrition part, right? They don't come back because of a lot of those factors, right? So the dungeon becomes a classroom and vice versa. When I talk about dungeon, I'm talking about where the monsters are, right? Where the traps are, where, all the obstacles are, right? An educator, that's you guys and me, and a rule system must create a narrative environment, create a place where those stories can happen, right? Where the aspirant learner can acquire and master the skills that will build on each other. Now, video games, this is where we get to the video game part, have been teaching through narrative environments for years, wordless effort, seemingly effortless. Okay, let's take a look at this. This is one of the most famous levels in gaming. Yeah, it's like, this is Super Mario Brothers World 1-1. And take a look at this. Wordlessly, our protagonist moves through this level, and everybody's got a different way of doing it. It depends, how quickly you want to get through, right? You can take shortcuts, you can take the long way, right? But there's a couple of things that you learn here, right? One, you can only move forward. Okay, two, you can't go back. Three, you touch that thing and you die, okay? You touch that thing and you get big, right? And of course, at the end, you see this pit and you think, okay, you don't fall in that. Bad things will happen, right? And it teaches the basics of the environment, the things that they're gonna need as they move forward to more complex things, right? So that's the amazing thing I like about games. I mean, is, especially gaming environments, right? Because what's happening is, as they learn through the scenery, right? James Paul G calls it's the trajectory, it's the path, okay? Through which they kind of navigate the system, they navigate the rules, right? In the architecture, right? You're maneuvering, you think, oh, okay, I can't fall in here, right? So that's gonna change your trajectory, that's gonna change your pathway, right? Just like your student, right, is going to learn how to navigate, right? Or your learner in adult education business, right? The player your students and the games designers, you, the curriculum designers, you can come together to play a game. Right? You can come together and play a game. It's got complex rules, right? That you have to follow and your learner has to follow. But, you know, but this is where the learning happens, right? As they navigate through this space, as they navigate through these systems. This is the space where your learners become heroes in their own story. Okay, part of the way we do that is creating this feedback loop. We're gonna kind of take a look at this. This is from a later game called Metroid that kind of takes some of the Super Mario stuff and kind of builds on it. And this is courtesy of Jeremy Parrish, who's a journalist.
Counterparts, the exploration, the character growth, the constant acquisition of better gear with which to perform ever greater feats. What sets Metroid apart is the fact that all of these mechanisms are one and the same thing. Samus herself is both heroine, weapon, and tool. As Samus explores, she grows in power by collecting the gear upgrades she finds along the way. And as she gains upgrades, she also increases her ability to explore the underground passages of planet Zebes. The more she explores, the more she becomes able to explore further. It's a simple feedback loop, but a profoundly addictive one.
Right. So as a character becomes more powerful, the more they can explore and gain more power. That's your learners. The more they learn, the more powerful they get. And once they get powerful, they can see, hopefully they'll see how powerful they have become. They can look back and go, oh, wow. Well, I want more. I want to do more. And so we create that feedback loop, right? But how do we do that? It can be done. Games do it, do it all the time, but how can it be done? Okay. Well, part of the way we do this is through gating. Well, one of the ways we can do this is through gating. There's many ways, but in the scope of this talk, gating. We're going to talk about this.
Indeed, Metroid seems designed to build off the player's familiarity with Super Mario Bros. As I've written about before, the game begins by giving the impression of a standard side-scrolling action platformer. As in Super Mario Bros., Rush and Attack, and even Rygar, you begin by running left to right, avoiding and destroying enemies along the way. You can only make it so far this way before you come to a seeming dead end. In the third room over, Samus encounters a low-hanging wall, leaving only a gap too small to walk beneath. NES owners would have encountered a similar structure in World 1-2 of Super Mario Bros. So similar, in fact, it's hard to believe that the Metroid team wasn't inspired by that game. But where Mario could either run beneath the gap while in his unpowered up form, shatter the bricks above it to create a path, or perform a running slide beneath it by ducking, Samus has none of these options. She can only run, jump, and shoot, and neither of these will get her past the obstacle. Instead, you're forced to backtrack to the opposite side of the initial starting point, where a power-up awaits just beyond the initial screen in the wrong scrolling direction. The placement of the item forces you to come to terms with the fact that you're going to be playing this game differently than you did Mario, which was an adventure that wouldn't even allow the screen to scroll backward. Even Kid Icarus used that style of ratchet scrolling throughout, meaning Metroid works like Kid Icarus's dungeon stages, but with the free scrolling of Mario. Anyway, this item hidden on the opposite side of the starting point is called the Maru Mari, and it allows Samus to duck. Kind of like Mario, for whom it probably isn't named. Unlike Mario, Samus turns into a rolling ball when she ducks. In ball form, she can roll freely through the world. Ducking into a ball allows you to slip through narrow passages, and it also puts Samus in a kind of standby status that allows her to drop explosive bombs. Once she's added bombs to her arsenal, of course. Bombs work as both weapons, capable of damaging foes, and as tools that can shatter certain tiles in the floor and wall, revealing new passageways.
Okay, so once again, without a manual, right, without anybody to kind of bark in your get video games, right, these days they hold your hand, they'll tell you how to do everything. But this game, through its environment, right, through its embedded rule set, right, tells you how to play it, right? It does that by gating. You know, Samus cannot get past a certain point without becoming a ball, but you don't know that, you know, from the, you know, you figure, oh, I must have missed something. So you go back and you think, oh my gosh, I can go back in this game. This is different than Super Mario Brothers. I can actually go back, and then you find this thing that makes you turn into a ball, and now you learned a skill. You learn a skill, right? The environment taught you, hey, if I turn into a ball, now I can do more things, right? And that's what gating is. You have to learn how to do something before you move on. I know it sounds simple, but we need to embed that without making it gaming, right? Gaming, right? So let's take a look. So in your lab curriculum, right? How can we gate this, right? How can we create this feedback loop? How can we gate this? Well, we do this by controlling the flow of material, okay? Assuming the adult learner is your protagonist, right? We as the designer of the curriculum of the course, we can initially limit the number of choices or options the learner has. If the learner has too many courses open in Burlington English or Aztec or USA Learns, they're gonna get overwhelmed, they're gonna get confused, and they're not gonna be able to focus on just one or two things, right? We want to limit those choices, right? Now, once they get it, once they learn the system, once they learn the basics, right? Once they learn how to use a computer in some cases, right? That's a gate sometimes. You can open up a wider number of options when the learner has mastered some things, right? And then as the student, so we kind of start narrow, we open up, and then when they get to the end, right? Whether that be finishing your course, getting their certificate, graduating, getting their high school equivalency, then we narrow it down again. So they're, you know, just focused on, you know, crossing the finish line, right? So we control the flow, we gate things, okay? So by doing this, we can create the kind of feedback loop and focus and persistence that, you know, gamers find all the time, right? When we design it. And you're thinking, well, how do I do that? Well, I've done it. But I'm gonna show you a really big example here. So this is case number one, right? This is a video. First, I'm gonna show you a video game case, and then I'm gonna show you a case from something I did a few years back, okay? So this is a game called Knights of the Old Republic. It's from 2003. It was developed by BioWare. So this is a role-playing game. This is a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons. You may have heard of it. But here, the D&D stuff, all the dice rolling, all the stat keeping, that's hidden. The computer, the software takes care of that for you, right? You know, everything's turn-based, and you follow this story where you're stopping the Sith Armada, I know it sounds silly when I say it, from taking over the galaxy, right? There's numerous stories and side quests. There's several playable allies, right? You create your own protagonist. You create your own protagonist, right? And you choose. You're gonna be light side, you're gonna be a good guy, dark side, you're gonna be a bad guy. You choose your trajectory, you choose your path through this, right? Your character grows, they get stronger, depending on what side they go on. Also, your character has amnesia, getting that dramatic action in there, very soap opera, right? You know, quest for your own personal identity, but you know, that's our learner. It is a quest for personal identity, right? They're trying to figure out, who are we, right? Where do we fit in this world, right? And creating a game space, a narrative environment, safe one, right, in your classroom, that's where they can find that out, okay? Let me show you how this looks as a diagram. So once again, this is the story, right? This is the story as it is. This is our KOTOR model. This is Knights of the Old Republic. Now, if you look at, we're gonna look at a dramatic narrative 3-act structure, okay? Act 1, we have limited choices. Your character is only bound to one environment. That's where you learn the rules, you learn the basics. And once you get that, there's an inciting incident where that planet gets blown up, okay? And you can't go back, that's it. And then once that happens, all these choices, all these planets are now available for you to grow and explore and, get your skills up, right? This is act two in the dramatic structure. This is when the character has the most choices. They can be the good guy, they could decide to be a good guy, they could decide to be a bad guy. Who are they going to be at the end of this? And then finally, you get to a point where it narrows again in act three, right? That's when you have the least amount of choices. This is the climax, the resolution of the story, but the protagonist is now focused on the end goal. Right? All your earned skills are put to the test. That's your assessment. So the outcomes are simple. It's win or lose. You achieve the main goal in the story in this game, or you quit. There's no game over in this game. You either finish it out or you quit. That's it. That's it. Right? And the same thing goes for our learners, right? They either finish the game or they quit. Right? Well, we don't want that. But notice there's gates here. There's gates here at the top. There's gates here at the bottom. Right? And we can control that. Case number 2 is a Burlington English lab. This was, I did this, I piloted this a few years back, flex model of blended learning, not high flex. This is different. So this is a blended learning model. This is flex. This was all in person. Okay. So pretty much the class consisted of course, our Burlington English licenses. 50% of the class was independent study, language acquisition. So students would, I would assess them, right, using Burlington's assessment tool. Of course, I would go by their CASA scores, and of course, I would talk to them and I figure out, okay, where do they need to be? And that's where I would put them. And so part of the class, they're learning at their own pace, okay? They're going through kind of the grammar, the speaking, and the listening parts, right? And if you use USA Learns or Burlington English, or something like that, you've probably seen that before. Teacher during this point, okay, the teacher acts as support, monitor, case manager, because we are managing cases, right? And then the other 50% is spent on EL Civics teacher-led instruction, right? So that there's our group teacher-led instruction for EL Civics, right? But this gives, so that there's benefits to this, okay? So, and I ran this program for a good year, right? So I piloted this for a year and kind of wrote down what I learned from this experience, okay? Anyway, so this is how the class would work, at least the first 50%, okay? So this is based on Burlington English's Everyday English. Now, for those of you who have come into Burlington English a little bit later, this is back in before 2019, I believe, or yeah, when Burlington English was an actual software that you had to install on the computer, okay? It wasn't online yet. So students would start the module, right? Now they would do the lesson, which back then was known as a situation. Now there is 2 parts to that situation. There's a part A, there's a part B. They can, spend as much time with that as they want, okay? Now, this is where the gate comes in, okay? To reinforce that learning and also to check, the students would also be assigned a worksheet that they would have to hold on to. They would have to collect all their work in a binder, right? So they'd have to create a portfolio of their work. So that's worksheets and assessments, right? Teacher will have to grade and check that personally, sit down with them one-on-one, right? And if they're having problems, that's where one of the places where the teacher can sit down, work with them if they're stuck, right? Through whatever topic they're having a problem with. And then once they work through the situation and they're finished with the worksheet and it looks really good, and if they don't need any additional support, if they need additional support, they're gonna stay there. For me, I would pull something from All Things Grammar, or, from one of my books, or from Standout, or, whatever I needed to do to support them in this part of their journey, okay? So think of this as a space though. Don't just think of this as a pathway. Think of this is their dungeon, right? This is their level, right? And finally, once they acquired those skills, once they powered up, then there's the boss right there. There's the boss of the level. That's their, I guess formative in some ways, because it's just for the situation. In some ways, it's cumulative assessment, and they have to pass with a 70% or more. And if they do that, then and only then will I open up the next module to them. Because as you know, because in some applications, depends on what you're using. Even if you're not using an application, you can do this too with your books. You can, say, okay, looks like you're ready to move on. Some people, this is the great thing, because some people are ready to move on and they'll move on. Some people need more remediation. They'll stay behind and they'll do what they gotta do to get there, right? So everyone's kind of moving at their own rate. Why? Because we controlled the flow of the material. You can do that in Burlington, and you can do that in Aztec, and you can do that in a couple of, learning systems like that, okay? Okay, so any questions here? Any questions here as far as this is concerned? So just pausing right here, because I did a lot of talking, but now I'm at the point where I actually kind of put this to work. Okay, here we go. So these are my results. This is based on just empirical observation mostly. As a teacher, I was able to individualize learner programming, meaning I was able to kind of tailor it to their needs, their own personal needs. Tardy learners, I live in an area that is mostly agriculturally based, I teach in an area that's agriculturally based. I work in the Salinas Valley. So most of my ESL students were, because I'm HSC now, but I was an ESL teacher for 9 years. And a lot of them were farm workers, right? And I would get people coming in late. That's pretty normal. But you ever experience that? You have people coming in tardy and you've already started your lesson. You're about a half hour into your lesson and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to have to do this again. But I didn't have to worry about that because at the first half of the class, everyone was studying independently. I was working one-on-one in a tutorial kind of capacity to the people who needed it. And the people who came in late, they just kind of got to work. They knew what to do once they learned the system, once they learned the rules, right? So I was able to work with them one-on-one. Even in big classrooms, I was actually able to work with them one-on-one. So adult learning, we can assess it formatively through checks, and we can communicatively assess it. Students, this is the crazy thing, guys, and I'm going to tell you this right now, and I've waited years to share this with you. Student takes ownership of their learning and they develop persistence, and I've seen this. So one of the things they have to do, they have to keep their worksheets and their tests in a portfolio, so I can check it, they can share it with me. It tracks their progress, right? Plus, they take ownership of what they're doing. Learner can observe their progress. They can see how strong they're getting. They can actually look back and say, oh, wow, this stuff is easy now. Look at the stuff I'm doing now. That's way harder, but look at the beginning of my binder. So I'm a big paper person too. I like paper and pencil just as much as I love computers and video games. They can look back and they say, wow, I've learned a lot. So they feel their power. They feel that growth, and that builds persistence. That builds that loop. Craziest thing that happened once I was further into the course, people were asking to take home homework. In ESL, that is, especially where I live, that's amazing. Because that was the only time in my 9 years of teaching ESL, all levels, beginning, advanced, intermediate, that I had people asking me, hey, can I have the worksheet? I'd like to take it home, work on it over the weekend. Wow. They found the game. They found the game in this. They learned the rule system. They found the game. They wanted to participate, right? And so that's never happened since then, since I had that particular model. You know, it's never, I'm in HSC, so people study no matter what. I'm a high school equivalency teacher now. They'll study no matter because they have intrinsic motivation, but ESL, that's a different game. But that's just the best thing that happened. That was a gift. Yeah. So, some thoughts on the future. I'm an HSE teacher, so this is a work in progress. This is this is based in research that I did. This is based in graduate research I did in 2010. Okay, and it's still a work in progress and it's still ongoing. Some things I'm thinking about now is because I'm an HSE teacher, how can I design this to create a similar feedback loop? I teach high flex. I teach high flex now, morning and evening. I use Canvas and I use Aztec Learning. You know, how can I use Gates and, you know, a similar approach, right? You know, will I be able to narrow and then widen and narrow again as they get closer, as they pass more and more high sets exams, right? And the cool thing is, I try to make it again. I'm starting to find again, because I tell my students, hey, you know what, the more of these you pass, the less of me you have to see, right? Because it's like if because I teach one topic per day, and I say, well, you pass science, you don't have to come in on science day anymore. You know, you don't have to worry about that, right? So that's part of the game, right? You feel yourself getting stronger because you don't need to see me as much. That's kind of where I'm starting here. Okay. Now, the other consideration to make is distancing finding the game from gamification. Gamification is way different. I'm not a big fan of it. Gamification is basically where you're taking, you know, something like work or study and you're giving extrinsic, meaning outside rewards like points or whatever that don't really matter, versus intrinsic motivation for adults, right? You know, it's got to come from with our adults. It's got to come from inside, right? You can't just give someone points and say, okay, well, here you go. Right? So finding that game is finding that motivation from the inside to finish the game. My moonshot here, going forward, sometime in the future is creating an actual game, based on existing game creation platforms, such as, using Game Maker or, RPG Maker, one of those, and you make it for mobile. I'd love to have like a high set course, like embedded in an actual game, where in order to get through it, they have to understand, you know, the science. You know, that's my that's my moonshot. So there we go. So that's my thoughts on the future. So find the game and what you're doing. Do you feel like when you go in there and you're with your students, like with my college instructor, you feel like, yeah, I'm not really working. Of course it's work. It's always work. But at the same time, you feel like you're, you know, playing with your students. And if you feel like you're playing a game with your students, right, that you made, then maybe you found the game, right? There we go. So thank you for your time. Okay. There's my email if anyone's interested in picking my brain a little bit more on this. I am a Canvas lead. I'm an administrator at my school. I'm also the de facto educational technologist and Burlington English person. So if anybody wants to pick my brain about that too, you're more than welcome to. My personal gaming blog, which sorely needs to be updated, that's my URL right there. Where I try to make a kind of a more personal connection between, you know, the emotion, what's happening inside to video games, how, you know, some of us can make a very personal connection to video games. Because there's an emotional connection. Okay, so thank you. Also, if you want to take some quick photos, there's my research. So this is my sources. So for those of you at home, whatever, you want to pick up on some of that I kind of threw out there, especially the anthropological things, you totally can. And then here's the other one. There's the YouTube video. It's a really great series that I found that from. So if you want to take a screenshot of that. And of course, send your evaluations. Go, hey, Mr. Gomez talked too much. You know, it's okay, because I do that. Okay, so that's it, guys. Thank you guys for coming.